Well, good morning to Pre-algebra, or whenever you're watching this. If you have any questions after we get through with this, right, make sure to let me know. There's always the tutor sessions on Fridays if you want to sign up for those. But let's go ahead and get started. So we always get started with our supplement. So let's go ahead and do that. So let me see if I can scroll down a tiny bit. So that's our supplement there, and you see our lessons there, 25 to 28. Yeah, week 7 supplement, and then you guys are doing exam 5 at home. So uh, scroll up here, and then we'll go ahead and get started on our supplement. So we've been discussing adding uh, negatives and positives. Oops, not 6, week 7. Okay, I'm gonna get used to using the screen here, but for week 7 supplement. So before we were just using regular numbers to do negatives and positives, so we'd have something like -6, plus 2, and then maybe -5 or something like that. Okay, so I said, the easiest way to think of this is say, oh, I owe somebody $6, and then I give them $2 back, and then I ask for another $5, right? So if I did -6 plus 2, that would get me to -4, and then I'd have -4 minus 5, which means that I'd owe them -$9, right? Okay, so for this week, we're going to add variable expressions, which is what we're going to do a lot in algebra. So we're going to define a couple of things. So you guys have heard what a variable is before. Let's have a little definition of a variable. So a variable can be anything from x, y, b, z. It really could be anything. It could be any sort of letter here. So it could be a as well here. Okay, and a variable, we put a variable because we don't know what the value is. Okay, so last thing I'll say about this, so we don't know its value. So don't know its value. Okay, that's a variable. And then you guys probably heard of this word before. This one's called a constant. A constant is a value that never changes. So, for example, right, if you had the value, they put 12 in the example there, but you can do any value there. But if I say 12, right, 12 is always 12, no matter what the situation, right? You say 12, and you say, well, 12 of what, right? So 12 of something, right? So it could be 12 dogs or something. It could be $12. We just know that 12 dogs is equal to 12 dogs, right? This is not changing. Okay, so that's a constant. Now, the last thing to define here is what we call a coefficient. Okay, and a coefficient really is related to this constant here. If I'm talking about a coefficient, it has to be in conjunction with that variable. So we'll write coefficient here. Oops, coefficient. So if I had, right, what they said, example here, they said, well, let's say we had some term here that was, let me rewrite this here. Let's say I had this term here. So I'm going to call this a term, okay, and it was equal to 7x, like this, okay? So 7 here, so 7 is this number here, so 7x, and when I see 7x like this, really what I'm saying is that it's 7 times some value x, okay? Well, when I'm talking about this coefficient I'm actually referring to this 7 here. Okay, so it's really this 7 here. And then this other part x, well, we just talked about it right up here, right? Okay, well, this terms here, we define a variable. So x, y, z, a, we don't know its value, right? So 7, if I have 7 and x here, or 7 times x, move my colors somewhere else here, then I could say that this part right here, this is my variable, right? So when I see something like 7x, and I say, well, 7 times x, and I don't know what x is. So when we're adding variable expressions, let's just do a quick example of them over here, right? I move my thing down here. If we're going to add them, right, and they just had this example here, 36z plus minus 51z. So they picked a fairly standard example here, and you'll notice, right, when you notice that this is a z and this is a z. So if I'm talking about, maybe I'm talking about zoo animals, or it can be anything, right? But this right here, I don't know the value, right? I don't know the value of z. Let's see if my pen works. Okay, so I don't know its value. Right, so then what I simply do is I simply add the coefficients. So that here, so add coefficients. All right, we talked about the coefficients here, let me write this out. So we add our coefficients. So I'd just be doing 36 plus minus 51z, right? And if you think about it in terms of dollars, we can always think of these in terms of dollars, and then we notice that these are like terms, so we can add them. So if I have 36 minus 51, that's like, well, which one's going to win, right? I'm talking about this tug of war here. My negative is going to win, right? So then my negative is going to win, which means that I'll get minus 25 for my coefficient here, and then my variable is still z. So my answer here, whoops, not 25. Sorry. We can see it's not minus 25, it's minus 15z. Okay, so for large numbers, especially if you need to write them out, don't feel bad about writing them out. Just take your time and make sure you understand what's going on here. Okay, so it's like $36. We're just calling them Z here. Okay, but 36Z minus 51Z, they're like, right? They both have Z, and I can subtract those. Okay, well, you might want to pause this time and work on some of those problems there. We're going to go ahead and move on to our lessons for the week. So we got that. Now let's change back to blue here. And we'll talk about lesson 25. Okay, so lesson 25 here, we're talking about complex area here a little bit. We've already discussed this, so this one we're going to call area as a difference. As a difference. Okay, so if I had an example here, example 1, I'm just going to draw out our shape there. You can draw a shape there on yours. Sorry, it's always good practice to draw a shape, or draw the shape and fill things in by yourself. So this one is like a shape we've seen before here, where we have sides like this, and then this is like a little section over here, goes up and goes over. Okay, and they gave us these lengths here. They said, well, these are meters, right? So they said 6 meters here. I might write meters for everything, but they have 8 here, 12 here, and 4 here. Okay, so not too much to solve here for, but you can see that I'm not given these lengths here on this top right of the image here. So if I look at maybe this one, right? So I say, well, what is this length here? Well, I know that the entire length across the bottom here, right, is 12. And I know the length across the top here, that section I know is 6. So that means that if I was going to label this and I say question mark, right, this one here is 6. And then what about this left side here? Well, this left side, or this other section here, right, this last piece here, I know that it's 8 if I go on the left side and go all the way up. I know it's 4 if I go this way, so my missing number here would be 4, right? So this one is 4. All right, so now that I've labeled everything I know there, I can think about area as a difference. I'd say, okay, well, this section over here, I don't know if I need to use a different color here, but you can see there's this part over here, right, that I don't know here. So I could think about this as two shapes, right? We've done that before. But in this case, I'm going to say, well, what's the area of this whole entire thing? Well, let's say, okay, well, if I'm looking at the area of the total shape here, then we would write this out. You're going to say, well, the area of the total, right, is, well, I can see it's 12 here on the bottom, right? You guys see that? So 12 is this number here, and then we have 8 over here. So I can say, well, the area of the total is 12 times 8. Okay, and then that'd be 96. And I know my unit there is meters, so it'd be 96 meters squared. Okay, and then my little section up here, which I could call anything, but if I wanted to call this, I don't know, shape B, right? This is the part that I need to take away from my total there. So I'd say, well, what is the area of shape B there? Well, we just figured out that it's 6 here on the bottom and 4 on the side. So I say, okay, then this is 6 times 4, and which is just 24 meters squared, right? And then if I'm going to figure out the difference here, I could have written these on top of each other a little bit better, maybe. But if I have these here, right, so I have that, and I say, well, then the area of my shape here, so area of my shape, or my final area, okay, I can say that it's 96 minus 24, which would equal to 72 meters squared. Okay, so that's how you want to write this thing out here, so that you know what your area total is, and then your missing shape right there. Okay, now let's look at one other quick example here, and then we'll move on to our next lesson. So everybody understands, so area total 8 times 12 there, and then we're finding that missing area, we'd say B, so we do A, we do area of the total here, which is this one, right? And then minus 24. Okay. So let's make my color here blue again. So now if I go to example 2, there's not much different about example 2 here from example 1, except that I have 2 missing areas here. So I actually have, let's draw the bottom first. So I have the bottom here, and then I have up a little bit on both sides, and then I go in a tiny bit on both sides. I have this shape on the top. So a 10 here. Okay, let me see here. So 10, and then they gave me a lot of these distances. So they said this side is 2, this side's 4, this side's 2, this side's 4, 2, 2, oops, 2, 2, and then what else? Oh yeah, they said this is also 2, so this is the same on both sides. All right, so if I think about the area total here, right, then I say, well, the area total, what would that be? Well, and I'm just going to put AT here for area of the total. I know 10 is my length here, but let's draw it in red here, and we'll show the whole shape here, just so we can get an idea of it. So my whole shape would be as if I went up like this, and then I went over like this, and then I went over like this, and went down like that. All right, so I can see that, well, it's length times width, and my length times width here is just 10, so that's my 10 here, and then my width, or I guess you could say it's my, you could reverse them around if you want to. Well, I'm going up 2 this way, and then I'm going up 2 like this, so it's really 10 times 4. Oh, and then these are also feet, so we'll make sure we don't forget our units, right? This one says it's 10 long. Say, well, 10 what long, right? Okay, so 10 times 4, so that's 40 feet squared. Okay, so that's my area total. And if I'm looking at my shapes here, maybe I can label this shape A here and this shape B here. Those are the ones I need to subtract, right? So I go down here and say, okay, well, I found out my length there is now, yeah, I don't even need this 4. You guys see that, right? That 4 on top of the shape. I don't really even need to know that because I already have my distances for this shape here, right? So A right here, I can see it's 2 times 2. My shape for B, then that's just 2 times 4. Okay, so I'm going to scroll down to here, and then let's go ahead and figure out the area of these other shapes. So we'd actually just write it like this. Let's do area, and we'll do final, okay? So we'll say area, final, oops, M, okay, final, and say, well then, that's 40 feet squared, and then we can say minus, okay, so let's say minus shape A up here, so that's 2 times 2, so that's 4, so we'd say minus 4, okay, and then the other one over here, we have 2 times 4, so that one's minus 8, so we say minus 4, minus 8, so if I subtract 4 from 40, that's 36, we subtract 8, that's 28, so then I'd say that is 28 feet squared. And that would be my answer. Okay, pretty simple stuff. I don't think you guys probably are having much trouble with understanding this, but if you have questions on any of your problems, definitely let me know or let your parents know and they can help you with that. Okay, so let's go ahead. If you want to pause here and do your examples, and then we'll move on to lesson 26. Okay, so lesson 26 here. So lesson 26. So lesson 26, we're talking about groups of numbers here. And I can list all these things out here. I'm just going to list them here at the top because this is what it's about. So we're given groups of numbers. So say groups of numbers here. So groups. Oops. Sorry about this. Let me see if I can fix my mistake here. So groups of numbers. Groups of numbers. I think you guys have done this maybe a little bit before, so it's not a completely new topic here. But we have a couple of definitions here. So we have this thing we call range. Okay, so range kind of makes sense in the word itself, right? If you know the definition of a word. So range is like, well, how far is something, right? So you can say, what is the range of your car, right? You guys don't have a car, but your car might have a range and say how many miles you can go on one tank of gas. Okay, so this one is a high minus a low. Okay, and then if you have a mean here, okay, so mean is kind of a funny one because you say, oh, mean, and it's like, well, it's not a mean number, right? A mean is simply an average. Okay, so an average. Then you have a median. Okay, so oops, median. Okay, so median is kind of like the middle number, right? You can think of it almost like an average, but a median is a little bit different. So a median is actually just the middle number. So it's a middle number. So for example, if I had numbers 7, 9, and 12, right? I say, okay, well, my middle number is just 9, okay? Okay, that's it. Now for my mode, is my last one that we're going to talk about here is a mode. So a mode is the most frequent number. We're going to think of most common, okay? Most frequent, or you say, I think most common is fine, okay? Most common number. Okay, most common number. So in these three numbers over here, I don't have a most common, right? I just have 7, 9, and 12. So for that one, I'd say, well, the range there, what? You guys can see that? The range from 12 to 7, that's 5. My mean, we didn't calculate my mean, but if we did, we would say my mean, or my average, right? I'd go ahead and say 7 plus 9 plus 12, and then I divide it by how many numbers I have, right? So I say, well, I have 3 numbers there. So I do 7 plus 9, so that's 16. Let's scroll down here. 7 plus 9 is 16. 16 plus 12 is 28. So my answer would be 28 over 3. Okay. Now I could leave it like that as my answer for my mean, or I can change it to some mixed number or something, right? So then that would be what? Be 9, right? Because 3 goes into 29 times, so I'd have 9, and then I have 9 and 1/3, like that. Okay, and like I said, my range here, my range would be 5. My mean, I already said, and then my median would be 9. Okay, so my median is 9. And then for my mode, I just say none, right? So I can say mode, none, something like that, okay? So, because if someone asks you for the mode and you don't have one, then you want to just tell them that you don't have one. Okay, so let's go to one of our examples here. So, scroll up here. Now we got our definition. So to review here, right? Range, high minus low, mean, average, right? So we know that. So when you see mean, right? That okay, it's average. Median is the middle number. Mode is the most common. So, oops, that was a trying to scroll up. So if I have an example here, so example 1, they give me some numbers here. And you guys can see those in example 1. The first step when you have a bunch of numbers is you want to try to put them in order. Okay, so I'm going to put them in order here as I see them on the page there. So 26 is my lowest number, and then I have a 30, I have a 34, I have two 40s. When I'm listing these out, I don't just list one 40, I go ahead and list both of them. So I have 40 and a 40, and then I have a 42, and then I have 43, oops, 3, 47, 48, and two 50s, and then a 55. So D, 50, and then 55. Okay, now that's kind of the hard work there, right? Listen all my numbers, make sure I didn't forget any. So if I count them again, so I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. I have 12 numbers there. And let's see here, how many I start out with? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Okay, now I start with 12 numbers, and I have 12 numbers now. So let me erase this thing down here. Now I think about all these things. They asked for the range, the mode, the median, and the mean. So for range here, I say, okay, well for range, go back to my colors here. So my range, just my high minus low. I'd say, okay, well I have 55 minus 26. So 55 minus 26. My 5's not completely complete there. Okay, 55 minus 26, so that would be not 30, but it'd be 29, right? So I can go ahead and write that as 29. Okay, and then my next number to find is my mode. Well, I can do it in any order, but they asked for these in order, so they said find the mode, right? Okay, well, this one is a little bit tricky because you guys see this, right? I have two numbers that are 40. I have two numbers that are 50. So what is my mode here, right? Well, don't overthink it, right? Our mode is just going to be 40 and 50, okay? Because both of those numbers are the most common, okay? And then next is my median. So median is my middle number here, and so if I look here and I say, okay, well, let's pick my middle number. I have 12 numbers. So when you have 12 numbers, you actually don't have two middle numbers. So let me show you this, right? So if I change this to yellow here, you'd think that it'd be the sixth number. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You'd say, okay, well, what about this number right here? Is that my middle number? Here, I'll put this yellow here, okay? Well, let's count how many numbers are on the side over here. So I say, yeah, there's on the side here to the left, you say, well, there's 40, 40, 34, 30, and 26. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 numbers. Now, if I go on this other side, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh no, right? I don't really have a middle number, right? Well, when this comes in play, right, then I say, well, then I just have to pick both of my middle numbers. So if I pick 42 and 43, on this side, right, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 numbers, and on this side I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 numbers. So if you have an odd number of numbers, then you have to average the two middle numbers. So the median here would be 42 plus 43, and that'd be divided by 2, right? And we probably can see, right, the middle between 42 and 43 is really simple because it's just what's between them. So 42.5. Okay, so we're almost there. Now we left the hardest one for last, right? Okay, we need to add all these things up. Great, right? This is the hard part. It's not hard in the sense that you guys don't know how to add numbers, right? But if I'm going to add all these up, I need to be careful that I add them up properly. So let's see if I can do this here on the page. A little bit hard here because I don't have a whole lot of space here. But if you guys have these numbers written down on your page, right? If you don't have them written down on your page, just go ahead and line them up vertically and go ahead and add those, right? So then if I was going to add these, I'm going to give myself a lot of room here and say, okay, then just go ahead and add them, right? And then say, okay, well, I have 26, I have 30, I have 34, I have 40, I have 40, I have 42, whoops, 42, I have 43, 47, 48, two 50s, and then a 55. Okay, so at this point, if you want to pause the video and do it yourself, and then you can come back and see what I got. So here, if I add these up, then I'm going to get a 5, right? Because if I do this, I have 6 plus 4 is 10, 12, 15, 22, 30, 35. So that means I have a 3 to carry up over here. So then I have 3 plus 2 is 5, and if I add this whole column up, right, I'm going to get 50. So you can just pause the video and make sure you get the same thing. You should get 505. Okay, so now now that we have 505, let me say, okay, well, what is my mean? Right, well, my mean, right, is my total. So my total is 505, and we found out before, right, I have 12 numbers, so it'd be 505 divided by 12 numbers. And if I go ahead and divide that out, so do that here, 505, and then 12, and say, okay, well, that goes in 4 times. That means that I have 48 down here. Subtract 2, I have a 5, and it means I have 2 here, which means I have 24. I'm going to have a remainder of 1, right? So I could write this a couple different ways. So if I have a remainder of 1, I could simply write this as 42 and 1 over what, right? So I say, okay, well, then look at this and say I have 1 over 12. Okay, so that's one way to finish the answer, right? And I don't think they actually, oh, they said round to 2 decimal places, okay? So they said I want decimal places, so I can't stop there, right? So this is not an acceptable answer for this problem, but it would be if they didn't ask you to round it. So now I have 1, and then my decimal place after 505 is right there. So I can bring my 0 down, right? It doesn't go into 10, so I can bring that there. I can bring another 0 down here, and I say, okay, well, that's 100. Well, if I do 100, then that gives me an 8. And that gives me, if you multiply this out, you have 96, which you end up with a remainder of 4. And then you bring one more 0 down. Okay, it's a little messy, okay, because I'm running out of space. And then your number after 4208 is going to be 3. So if it's 2 decimal places, then I'd say, well, then you got to worry about rounding, right? Well, yes, you do have to worry about rounding, but I can see that if I write this out, I'm going to have 42.083, right? And 3 won't make my number round up. It'll make it stay the same. So then I have my final answer for my mean is 42.08. Okay, that was a long example just because we had to add all of our numbers up. Let's go to our last example for this one, which involves averages, but involves finding a missing number, okay? So we're going to go to example 4. Okay. So example 4 has to do with some pigs. Something that we're not. I don't know. Maybe some of you guys have pigs. I don't. I know. Sydney had pig. I don't know if you guys still have your pig, right? But we're talking about weights of pigs here. So we have 3 pigs here. Okay, and they tell us that we have a mean here, a mean of their weights. Okay, so the mean of the pig's weights is 320 pounds. 320 pounds. So we can abbreviate that with the LBS. Okay, kind of funny abbreviation as we talked about before. So if I have a mean of 320 pounds and I have 3 pigs, okay, that means that if I took the average, I'd say, well, each pig weighs 320 pounds. Well, that's not true. Not all of them weigh 320 pounds. That's just the average. So I say, okay, they gave me the first pig. They said the first pig was 220 pounds. So he's less than the average. And then this other pig is 240 pounds. So they're both less than the average. So our other pig that's remaining, hopefully you guys can see this, right? Our other remaining pig, pig 3, he's going to be a really big pig, okay? So in order to find that missing number, and say, well, my mean or my average here, okay, right? Remember this, right? This is my average, or AVG, okay? You'll see that at some point, right? People write AVG, that means the average. So that means that I can find my total, right? So that's a good step to say, okay, let's find my total. So my total total is just going to be my 320 pounds here. So my 320 times 3, okay? So my total is 320 times 3, which comes out to 960 pounds. So 960 pounds, okay? That's the total weight of all my pigs. And then I can add these two numbers up and say, okay, well, if I add these two numbers up right here, you could add them up like this, I suppose, but hopefully you can see this is 460 pounds for these pigs, okay? So 460 pounds. And I say, okay, well then, if that's 460, then I can just go over here, right? And I say, well, if it's 460, and we'll just subtract these numbers here and we'll find out our missing pig. Right, those are our 2 pigs added up is 416. So if I subtract this up, then I say, okay, well my final pig is a big old fat 500-pound pig. Okay, we found our final pig there. And that's pig 3. Right, pig 3 is equal to 500 pounds. Okay, so at this point you might want to stop in your practice problems and go on from there, but we're going to move on to lesson 28. Okay, so lesson 28, or 27 rather, 27. So lesson 27 is a pretty short lesson, I think, because we're going to talk about triangles. And I think you guys have had some exposure to triangles already. So really, the thing that you need to, there's only a couple things you need to know about the area of triangles. So we'll put lesson 27 here, so lesson 27. So area of triangles. Okay, so we all know that triangles have 3 sides here. So the only thing that I need to know here is, well, I have an area formula. So I have an area formula, and the area formula is 1/2. Okay, so there's a fraction here, or you can think of it as 0.5. So 1/2, and then you're going to multiply it by the base of your triangle. Okay, so 1/2 base times your height. Okay, times height. I say, okay, well, I just need to make sure I can identify that in my triangle, right? So we're looking at base and height, we have to say that this, right? We say that base is perpendicular to height. Okay, perpendicular to height. So you'll see this in our examples here. So if I go here and I draw this triangle here in example 1, actually they have 3 different triangles here in example 1, so I'm going to draw the 3 triangles. So I have, example 1. This first one is pretty easy because I say, okay, well this one's this one just looks like this, right? So this one we call a right triangle because it's got a square in the corner, meaning that it's perpendicular already, right? My length here is 6, my height is 4. So if I put the area here, I say, okay, well it's 6 times 4, and that's in half, right? So I do 6 times 4, so we can do 6 times 4 times 1/2. I guess I should put the 1/2 first, right? But it doesn't matter what order you do these in. You just want to make sure that you include everything in your formula, right? We already said 1/2 times base times height. So 24 divided by 2 is going to be 12. And then we want to make sure we include our units. So that I said those were inches. So I'd say inches squared. All right, and then my second triangle here. So this is part B here. Right, this is part A. My B triangle, I have going to be like this, okay? And then I have a length on the bottom here, okay? So the length on the bottom here is 6. And then I actually have this thing divided down the middle. And then this length of this side right here, or the middle, is 4. And then there's a little square there, okay? That means that's perpendicular. Because if you have a square, that means you have a 90-degree angle, right? Okay, so maybe I'll write that here. Perpendicular, so a 90-degree angle to each other. Okay, not too surprising there. Okay, so then this one really is identical to this one. You see that, right? So this one, the area is also 12 inches squared, because if I do 6 times 4 and I divide it by 2, it's going to be 12. Okay, last triangle to look at. So this last one here, I have a more slanted triangle here, and it's like this. Oops. Let's see if I can join this together here. Yep, so like this, and then it's like that. So this one, I actually have this length here on the bottom, at least from here to here is 6, right? So I can draw that with like an arrow like that, and I say, okay, 6 from there to there. Okay, and then there's this little dashed line right here, and it's like this, and then there's a right angle there, or there's a square right there. And so then when you do that, then they gave us a height of 4 there. So, right, our rule was that what? Our base had to be perpendicular to the height. Well, it is perpendicular right there, right? They could have confused you. Okay, let me point this out. They could have confused you, and they could have given you some number for this length right here, or this length right here, right? They could have given you something like that to confuse you. They didn't do it this time just because they want you to make sure you're not focused on those numbers necessarily, but you'll see practice A that you guys have. They do give you a couple different numbers to choose from, okay? So to review here, right, this first triangle, 6 times 4, and then that second triangle, this one right here in B on the right side there, right, 6 they gave us as a length across the whole bottom piece. But what we could do is we could say, well, that bottom piece, right, it really is like this side is, or that bottom piece is 3 and this bottom piece is also 3, right? So if they gave us 3 and 3, then we know that the length across the whole bottom would be 3 plus 3, which would be 6. Okay, so now I want to just do your practice real quick, and then we'll move on to our final lesson here. So I move on to final lesson 28. So maybe take a couple seconds, do 27, and then move on to 28. Okay, last lesson here, guys. So last lesson, we have 28. We're going to talk about fractions here. A lot of things you've already seen here. So we'll name this fractions and decimals maybe, okay? So lesson 28. We'll say decimals and fractions. Okay, decimals and fractions. So if I want to change something to improper here, so that's my first one here. I think you guys have already done this before, right? But if I want to change 14 over 5, okay, so this word here is improper, right? So improper, proper to mixed, okay? That's what I want for this first example here. So I say, okay, well, my first example is 14 over 5. Well, I can do that, right? And say, well, 5 goes into 14 twice, okay? So I should be able to see if that's 2, and then I have 4 left over, so I'd say 2 and 4 over 5, or 2 and 4/5, okay? Now if I have 21 over 8, that's just going to be 2 right here, right? Because 2 will be 16, so then I have 5 left over, so then I say 2 and 5 over 8, okay? And then 30 over 4 is my last example here. So 30 over 4. This one, well, I say, well, I know 8 times 4 is 32, so it must be 7, right? So 7 times 4 is 28, so it's 7, and I have 2 left over, 2 over 4. Now I can simplify this one a little bit, and I say, okay, well, it's 7 and 1/2. Oops, 7 and 1/2. All right, so it's pretty simple. You guys know how to do that. Now, if I go to the reverse, right, and say, well, let's do the reverse. Let's go ahead and say that I want to change it to improper, right? So if I want to change this to improper, so example 2, I have 7 and 4/9, okay, or 7 and 4/9. So like this, and I say, well, really, if I have 7 and 4/9, what does that mean? Well, it means that I have 7 whole numbers, right? So if I have 7 whole numbers and my fraction is 4/9, then I have 7 of my nines, right? So I like to think of this almost like a little circle and say, well, that means I multiply these together right here, and then what my final answer is, then I add it to that top number there, so I have a plus sign here. So 7 times 9 would be 63, so I have 63, and then I add my 4, so that gets me 67 over 9. Okay, and you can always double check yourself and say, okay, well, can I go back? Can I go back that direction, right? Say, well, if I put 9 into 63, I'd have 7, and then I have 4 left over, and that makes sense. Okay. Now, the next one, I want to talk about mixed fraction to a mixed decimal. Okay, this gets a little bit more complicated, but I think you guys have actually done this maybe once or twice as well. So I have 3 and 1/8. Okay, so that's my first one, and I want to change it to a decimal. Okay, to a decimal. So it's easy to write the first part, right? You say, okay, well, it's obviously 3, right? It's 3, but I don't know what decimal this is. One way we can think of it is say, well, can I change this bottom number right here, right? Can I change 8 to be 10 or 100 or something like that? Well, it's not very easy in this case, so I say, well, then I gotta go ahead and do something else here. So what is this fraction bar right here? You guys remember? It's a division symbol, right? And I say, okay, well, then that means I'm doing 1 divided by 8. So I do 1 divided by 8, then I can just say, well, this is 1.000, right? And then I can divide that. So 8 goes into 1 0 times, right? And my decimal place comes up here. 8 goes into 10 once, so I have 0.1. And then I can go ahead and do my division. So I have 2, whoops, 2. I can bring my 0 down, so that gives me 20. I can go into there twice, so 16, subtract it, gives me 4. I bring my other 0 down, 40, so that's 5. So I have 0.125. So then I can say, well, that's 3, and then my 1/8 there is actually a 0.125. Okay, so I think that's relatively straightforward, right? You're just identifying that fraction mark is really a division symbol, okay? And then last here, right, in example 3, they said, well, what if I have 32 and I have 1/5? This one is a little bit easier because I can make this bottom number 5, I can make that a 10, right? How can I make that a 10? Well, I got to be careful here, right? Because I want to make sure that I don't do anything illegal, right? So I say, okay, well then that's like if I expanded my fraction, I could say, well, instead of 32 and 1/5, I could say, well, then I have 32 and 2 over 10. And you say, okay, well, how does that help me? Well, then it's just identifying that I need to go back and remember my place values, right? So if I have my place values above 0, I have the ones place, I have the tens place, right? But then if I go below 0, or below 1, I mean, right, and I have a decimal, well, this is the tenths place, right? Not 10th place, but the tenths place. And this is the hundredths place, not the hundreds place, but the hundredths place, and so on and so forth, right? This would be the thousandths place. Well, you notice this number up here, right? I have 32 and 2/10. So if I can connect that and say, well, that's like 32 and saying 0.2, right? Because that 2 is how many tenths I have. So 32.2. Okay. And then finally, if I want to go the other way around, like say the other way around, but if I want to go from a decimal to a mixed fraction here, right? Let's just do a quick example here. This is not in the book, but if I had 3.1, right? Referring back to my thing right here, right? Say, well, 3.1, that means that I must have 1/10, right? So I have 1/10, so then I have 3 and 1/10. And then if I had 3.2, 3.2 means that I have 2/10. So that means that I have 3 and 2/10, like that, which means I have 3 and 1/5. Okay? Hopefully that makes sense, okay? Good? All right, so yeah, work on your practice, and that's it for this week. So let me know if you have questions, and I hope you guys have a good week. I'm feeling a lot better, so that's always good. Okay, bye guys.